Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to today's webinar, the third and final webinar in our short series of best practice webinars relating to upgrading EnterpriseOne. And today we will be focusing on testing your upgrade. And my name is David Hunt, and I will be your host for today. And I'm joined by Pierre Bodenstein, who is a very experienced JD Edwards technical advisor and consultant, and he knows an awful lot about everything to do with JD Edwards EnterpriseOne, and has got a great deal of experience with major projects and upgrading EnterpriseOne. So I urge you to make use of Pierre's experience today. Make sure that you do ask some good questions, anything you're not sure about when it comes to upgrading EnterpriseOne or testing EnterpriseOne, then please do make sure you raise your questions. And if you wish to raise a question, you can do so by using the questions panel, which you will find on the right-hand side of your screen in the dashboard towards the bottom of the dashboard. Now, if we look at the typical EnterpriseOne lifecycle, there are really three major phases. There's the initial implementation phase, the major upgrade phase, then perhaps the realization that staying code current might actually represent a more sensible approach than undertaking major upgrade projects every 5 to 10 years. Now, whilst the focus of this series of webinars is on the upgrade stage, what we're going to cover today actually applies equally well to applying a code current uplift, a single ESU, or even adding your own custom code into your E1 system. The agenda we're going to cover in our 60 minutes that we have together today are looking at 4 key areas. We'll be looking at planning the testing of your EnterpriseOne system. We'll then move on to the issues relating to executing your testing. And then we'll show you how adopting the best practices that we will introduce you to today can actually help you to slash your testing effort by up to 85%. And then we'll have a few minutes towards the end for any of the questions that you would like to raise with us. So let's look first of all at planning your testing. And in this section, we're going to be looking at just why a new approach was required to enable people to test their system, and particularly to plan the testing of your system. We'll be reviewing some of the key challenges that you face when it comes to planning your testing, and we'll introduce you to a new and better way to actually go about this part of the project. Now, as you'll know, Oracle has been promoting the concept of code current for its JD Edwards customers, and it's been doing so for 2 or 3 years now. And you will probably also be aware that DWS has been a keen supporter of this strategy, and our existing software-led services take a lot of the effort, hassle, and cost out of upgrading and then staying code current. Now, we conducted some research just over a year ago to find out why more people haven't already adopted a code current policy. And we conducted this research amongst more than 100 JD Edwards customers. And we asked the very specific question, what issues are stopping a code current policy in your organization? And the top reason given at 76% was that testing is difficult and time consuming. And this confirmed the smaller, more informal survey that we conducted at a UK Oracle user group conference a few months earlier. Testing, therefore, will be a key challenge that you do need to address when carrying out your next EnterpriseOne upgrade. But surely you might think that there are testing solution options out there in the marketplace. Yet, according to the research we carried out, most users have resorted to manual testing rather than use the existing solutions. So we asked why. And it turns out that the current testing options available have their own problems, with the top issues being the need for specialist staff, the fact that changes to the code will require complex changes to the testing solution, and that testing is too time-consuming and far too complex. So we wanted to dig a bit further into this, and we wanted to find out just what was actually of most importance to JD Edwards EnterpriseOne customers. And so we asked them what functionality would make a new testing solution be of interest to them. And this is what they told us. I'll give you a moment or two just to review this list. Now, the top 3 issues that were brought to our attention all relate to planning your testing. And the next 2 issues in the list will be addressed when we talk about the management and automation of your testing later in this session. Now, the biggest dilemma facing your quality assurance team is how to identify precisely what needs testing. And to do this, you need to know exactly what has changed in the ESUs you are installing, which objects those changed ESUs affect, and to be able to identify all the dependencies in your E1 system from all the affected objects to truly understand the full impact of those changes. And for those of you that may not be so technically minded and unfamiliar with Oracle terminology, ESU stands for Electronic Software Update. Now, once you have identified the full impact of those changes, you need to assess by how much any object has been affected, so you can determine how thoroughly you need to test each individual object. For example, is it just a yes/no dialog box that has been repositioned, or are there major changes to a whole business process? Equally importantly, you need to be clear regarding what does not need testing, so that you don't waste time, effort, and money testing things that have not been impacted at all. So what tools can you use to solve these key challenges to planning your testing? Well, until recently, there was absolutely nothing. But the good news is that DWS has a very good solution to this issue. So let me introduce Dimension Focus. This is a product we designed specifically to assist with the planning process. And what we're trying to do here is that we want to try to reduce the amount of testing that you need to do after applying any of the Oracle software updates. So this is where Dimension Focus can really help. What it enables you to do is to identify those programs that will be affected the most by applying the software updates. And these are the programs that you would consequently need to give the maximum amount of testing time to. It will also identify the programs that have not been affected, which you can then be confident, therefore, that will require only minimal testing or even no testing at all. Now, it's probably worth explaining how the Dimension Focus product actually works before we go on to give a short demonstration of the product. Now, Dimension Focus works by investigating the programs that you use and how they will be affected by the ESUs. And let's pretend that the programs on the screen are the ones in your system. And these contain a mixture of interactive and batch applications as well as custom programs. Now, Dimension Focus has the ability to analyze the lower level objects that are used by these programs. So, for example, all the tables, business views, and business functions. Dimension Focus also knows about the interdependencies between these objects, and it can build up a multi-level hierarchy of how they are all interlinked. We can then identify those objects that would be directly changed as a result of installing the ESUs. So these are the objects that Oracle has modified. This could be as small as 5% of the total number of objects in your system, potentially even less, even if you're installing a large number of ESUs. And also, due to the cumulative nature of the way that Oracle packages up the ESUs, just because an object is included in the ESU, it does not necessarily mean that it has been changed compared to the version of that object that you currently have installed. However, Dimensional Focus can figure all of that out, and it can exclude any objects that haven't actually changed. Using our knowledge of the interdependencies, we can also identify the top-level programs that are affected by changes in the lower-level objects. So, for example, if we have a business function that has been modified by Oracle, this might affect the way that the business function above it will run, and the same for the business function above that, until we get to the top level. So now we know that we also need to test this program, since it could be affected by the changes lower down. And if we do that for all the objects, then we can build up a complete picture of the programs needing to be tested. However, it also enables you to get a list of the programs that have not been affected by the ESUs. And what this does is to potentially reduce the number of programs that need to be retested by giving you the reassurance that they have not been impacted at all at the code level by any changes that Oracle has made. I would now like to hand over to Pierre, and Pierre is going to give you a short demonstration of the products. If you bear with me one moment, I'll just hand over control to Pierre. Okay, Pierre,
thanks, Dave.
control.
There we go. So, yeah, thanks for handing over, Dave. Let me just start that up. So before we get into me showing dimension focus, let me just quickly pause and let's think about some of the stats. So like Dave was saying, when we want to embark on a change event, we need to go and test potentially the object that's been affected. So we glibly refer to the sales application or the purchase order application or the journal entry application, but we don't always know or realize that there's many forms and sections of code that needs to be tested. So if I focus your attention on 0911, which is the journal entry application, which has got 9 subforms, that's potential forms that could be changed, and 101 sections of code that could be changed. So keeping that in mind, let me open up the dimension product for you. So what we can see over here is the dashboard of dimension focus. So the quadrants that you see, the top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right, is different change events that we're embarking on. So a customer has told us that they want to apply an ESU or a grouping of ESUs. Please analyze the impact of the changes and how it needs to be tested. So what we've got here, if I click on this cumulative ESU event, so that's a bunch of ESUs that we've applied and then we want to see the impact on our JDE environment. So immediately you're getting the 10,000 foot view of what's been affected. So it's giving you some of the system code, so I can see which areas of JDE Edwards has been affected by this change event. There's nice dashboards and statistical information. I like to scroll down to my personal favorite, which is these 2 donuts. So the left-hand side donut is giving me a view of the objects that's been selected as part of the ESU, grouping of ESUs that we want to apply in our environment. And focus is saying, look at the objects, compare it to the environment, the target environment that we want to apply this to, comparing the specification files, comparing the date and timestamp and the properties of the objects in the target environment, comparing that to the ESU that we want to apply. And what focus has identified here is that 54% of the objects, the change objects that we want to apply, doesn't even require testing because they have not changed. That means that those objects probably have been applied to my environment on another ESU, because Oracle does that from time to time where they would ship duplicate objects into change events in ESUs. So right out of the gate, all that we have to worry about, all the objects that's been applied that we want to change, 45% only requires testing. So we've already eliminated almost 50% of effort of testing objects which did not change. Right. The donut on the right-hand side is just giving you that high level view of the change event that we're embarking on. How severely is this change event impacting my overall system? So we can see that this is not a huge change event. It's only affecting about 5% of the environment. So if that increases more, I would obviously throw a bit more resources at it to make sure that I'm covering off all the testing requirements. So scroll down to the bottom, and I'll show you here. The information that's depicted in this grid is just giving you a listing of all the different objects that's part of a change event that we're going to embark on, and in which ESU they actually apply. So this information you can easily get as part of the CNC guys, and they could extract and give you this information. What I want to do is just focus your attention on, you can see, like David was saying, there is a business function, a data structure, and a couple of applications. But which object has been affected? Where does my users have to go? So to get that detailed information of the relationships, we click on the testing heat map. So the heat map goes one level deeper now. So now we're getting into the actual detail of the change event that we want to embark on. So the top here, you'll notice that we've got a bunch of different tabs. So we've got unaffected, execution, master parent, and ESU objects. That's just different ways of looking at this change event. So if I want to see a listing of the ESU objects, I will click on that tab. My personal favorite is looking at the master parent. Master parent is the most logical point that a tester, an end user, a testing champion can find which objects has been affected directly or indirectly by this change event. Because remember, the change from the ESU, it's got a couple of business functions in there. And when you test the business function, you don't test the actual business function. You test the result of the change of that business function on the application. So how do I know which applications has been affected? That's what Focus is telling you. So here you can see these are the objects that's been affected by this change event. If you look a bit to the right, you'll see there's a score indicator. That's just giving me an indication of the severity of the impact of this change. Test managers, by the way, love this screen. So what I can do as a test manager, I can say, please show me, let's say, all system code 43, all of those objects. So here you can see here's all the objects. So what I could go and do is going to say, well, these objects over here, I want to assign to a specific tester. So I would say, let's assign this to Sean to test. As simple as that, then I could go and assign those objects for him to go and test. What I'm going to do now is we've assigned a bunch of objects for me to go and test. So I've logged on as the demo user, as you can see over there. And here's the objects that's been asked for me to go and test. So there is 0911. 0911, the journal entry application. So as a tester, all I need to do is click on the application to provide me even more detail. So I'll zoom out for now, and then I'll zoom in so you guys can read the screen. So what we're seeing right here is the blue node on the left is telling me this is the application that needs to be tested with its execution point. Key point execution point means that a user will be able to access this application on a menu somewhere. The next node that you're seeing is the form. Because remember when I showed you the stats, there's like 9 subforms of the journal entry application. What Focus is telling me right now is only one form has been affected by this change. Don't go test the other 8 forms, they haven't been changed. So you see how I'm saving time now on what I'm testing and what I'm not testing. So by clicking on the node, it's now showing me the detail of which event has been affected. So there we can see it's when I'm putting something into the grid, so right grid. If I look on the grid, these red nodes that you see on the screen over here, that's the actual affected object. That's the object that was shipped as part of the ESU that's going to be the change. So here you can see there is a business function which is validating the subledger, and there's a relating data structure. So those 2 objects affect the grid when I'm capturing a journal. What we've got as well is if you hit the binoculars on the affected object, it brings up a hot link for you to be able to click on the actual ESU that will take you through to Oracle's update center, where you can go and find the bug information of the specific change. So I've gone and looked at the Oracle website to go and see what that bug was, and what Oracle has done on this fix is added some proper validation into the subledger field. So when I go and capture a journal entry, I need to make sure that my subledger and subledger type is valid, that I can't put any garbage into the subledger field. Right, so as soon as I've now gone away and have done my testing and see that everything is working, I can then mark off by clicking on the little tick box. see there, to show that these sections have been tested. So that's very useful for me as a tester, so I can keep my wits about me. What have I done? What have I not done? So it's a little bit of a tracking and tracing of what's been done. What I could do as well is I could say, well, I've tested the whole journal application, and I can just say, mark everything as tested. So I've tested the journal entry application, 0911, and it's all working fine for me. So what I want to do now is I just want to go back. So the logic here is I've now tested it. So you can see why I would be doing that. The test manager doesn't need to bug me and ask me, how are you doing? Are you coping? Are you testing? Are you progressing? All that the test manager would do is he would log on to this heat map, and he can monitor the applications, who it's been assigned to, and their progress, whether they've tested or not. So as I'm ticking off the applications that I'm testing, they change to yes, 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 yes. So the test manager then can see the confidence and track my progress as I'm moving forward. So just to summarize, what we've got there is we looked at 0911. So that object has been affected by this change event. 9 forms is in 0911, the journal application, with 100 sections. We now see that only 1 form has been affected, with only 2 sections of code. So you can see how that's a huge saving in terms of effort and focusing your attention of testing only on the section that's been changed. Don't waste your time on doing testing on stuff that has not been changed. Thanks, Dave. Over to you.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully you can see from the short demonstration there that Pierre gave you just how powerful Dimension Focus is. There is nothing else out there in the marketplace that can do anything like what Dimension Focus can do in helping you to identify exactly what needs testing and how you need to go about the testing process. So what I'm going to do now is to move on to the execution of your testing. And here we have a number of challenges that we need to be thinking about. And so I'm going to go through a number of these in a fair amount of detail in just a moment. And then we'll explore what are the options available to you out there in the marketplace to help you with your testing. And then again, we're going to introduce you to a new approach from DWS that simplifies the whole test management of your testing process. Now, there's a lot of research out there about how long people spend testing their software systems. And Carnegie Mellon University did some research a few years back. And in a typical software development project, they estimated that 35% or thereabouts is actually spent on testing. Now, when it comes to upgrading an EnterpriseOne system, we've had feedback from customers saying that actually testing can take up to 65% of the total upgrade effort. So there's an awful lot of time, effort, and money is spent on testing the systems. And hopefully you've now started to see from the demonstration that Pierre has given you that we can start to make a massive reduction in the testing effort. And we're now going to show you some even more useful things. Now, you may recall this slide that I showed you earlier on today. Now, we've already addressed the top 3 requirements that customers told us were important to them. As I mentioned, no one else can address these requirements. Only DWS can do that with our Dimension Focus product that Pierre has just demonstrated to you. We're now going to address the next 2 requirements, making life easy for end users to create and manage their own test scenarios without the need for an expensive test platform like the HP QTP platform. So I'm now going to drill a little deeper into some of the key challenges and considerations when it comes to functional testing of your EnterpriseOne upgrade. Now, clearly the first challenge is to identify just what needs testing and what does not, and Pierre has just covered that a few moments ago. So that alone can reduce your total testing effort considerably, as has been shown from the demonstration that Pierre gave, that some upgrades may only impact just 5% of your total custom objects. The next challenge relates to making sure that your library of test scenarios or cases is actually up to date. And this will be dependent on the analysis that identified what has changed and what has not. You will need to identify which objects add totally new functionality that offer opportunities to perform some business processes in a different and more efficient way, and these new processes will require new test scenarios to be created. For any objects that have been impacted by changes Oracle has made, you will need to either modify any existing test scenarios you created previously, or you will need to create new test scenarios if you don't have an existing test script or model. Even if you do have an existing test script for whatever test solution you're using currently, think to yourself, just how easy is it for you to modify those tests? How easy is it to test the changes you've made to those scripts? After all, a test script often requires highly technical test programmers to program the test scripts, so they need to be tested too. And it is quite common to find that existing tests can be extremely difficult and time-consuming to update, even to cope with quite simple changes to the user interface. You should strive wherever possible to keep things like brittle user interface tests that are tough to maintain, try and keep those to an absolute minimum. You also need to think about what resources are available to help create the test scenarios. Are you using, for example, a testing tool that requires expensive and scarce specialist test engineers to develop the scripts required? Or are you relying on manual testing that requires many key end users to manually run through their business processes on the new version of EnterpriseOne? Either way, testing can become a resource bottleneck and requires careful planning. When it comes to the execution of the tests, you need to focus your testing effort on the code that has been affected by the changes in the new ESUs, or even in the code that you've changed yourselves. You also need to consider how thoroughly you need to test each object. Is the change, for example, just the repositioning of a yes-no dialog box, in which case the testing required will be very simple? On the other hand, if the changes have a profound impact on a number of objects in a process, that process will require much more thorough testing. Again, the Dimension Focus tool we introduced you to earlier, that provides you with all the information that you need to help you plan your testing efforts. But if you're relying on manual testing and bugs are identified, these will need to go back to the development team to be fixed. The developers will need to know exactly what the user did and what happened or did not happen as expected, so he will require screenshots to help him. Once he's carried out the fix, this will need to be retested, and this cycle may need to be repeated several times until the code is performing correctly. Now, the problem with this approach is that each time it goes back to the user for retesting, it is taking up more of the user's time, so he will probably be less diligent with the testing on each testing cycle, and this could result in bugs creeping through to the live production environment with potentially serious consequences. Now, regression testing is the process of testing changes to computer programs to make sure that the older programming still works with the new changes. Now, this has been a real basic requirement of software testing, as up till now, it has not been possible to identify if any E1 custom code is unaffected by the changes or not. As a DWS Dimension Focus application that does identify what has been affected or unaffected, there should be no need to run tests on the unaffected code, unless you're in a specialist industry like life sciences or nuclear, where you may need a complete audit trail to prove everything has been tested and is still working correctly. With the sheer volume of potential testing that may be required, with subsequent cycles of fixes and retesting, it is important to keep accurate track of what has been tested satisfactorily and what still requires final testing. And this brings me to the classic issue of agile versus waterfall testing. In the waterfall testing model, no testing is started until all development activity is completed, so no usable software is produced until very late in the whole upgrade process. With an agile approach, software is tested as it becomes available and in a usable form. So testing of one bundle of objects can be performed whilst development is carried out on the next bundle of objects. And you may recall we spoke about how you can create a workable bundles of objects when we spoke about the execution of your upgrade in the second webinar in this series. So let's look for a moment at what are the options available to you when it comes to the actual management of the testing phase of your system. Now, the main affordable options that have been available until recently are the Oracle Application Testing Suite, or OATS, manual testing, of course, or those larger companies with larger budgets may consider outsourcing to a testing services company or using something like the HP Testing Suite. There's only a small number of software test offerings available on the market, but they do tend to be prohibitively expensive for most JDE customers, and they do tend to require the HP platform anyway to actually store the scripts and the results and to manage the testing process. And that is not an inexpensive platform. Whichever solution you choose, you are still faced with the issue of identifying what you need to test and what you do not need to test. So the dimension focus solution we introduced you to a few minutes ago will still be of enormous help and value to you, whatever your chosen solution for the actual testing. Now, as we've already shown you, the research that we carried out tells us that these existing solutions have a number of issues that make them unattractive to JDE customers. So clearly there is a need for a new solution because most people are relying on manual testing. There are few solutions available, and those that are available tend to be very expensive and are far too complex for the typical JDE customer. So I'd now like to introduce you to the DWS approach to managing your testing. And this is a product called Dimension Swift Test. And this looks at the management and the automation of your testing. And in this demonstration, Pierre is going to show you how you can execute a test, fix an issue, and then show how you've actually completed that particular test. So Pierre, back over to you.
Thanks, Dave. Right, so the screen that you're seeing right now is me logged on to Dimension Swift Test. So this is our automated testing product. So how we've seen this product being used by customers is that you typically create a base catalog. And it aligns very nicely with my OCD issues where you group tests logically together. So as you go and create scripts inside of Swift Test, you can see I would go and put all my general ledger scripts into one section, and the likes of accounts payable, accounts receivable, fixed assets. So the reason why you would do this is where you build up this catalog of scripts is that when I embark on a change event, that I can go and copy an existing script that I've created to my change event and potentially just change like one or two things of that script and that test pertaining specifically to the change event that I'm embarking on. So I don't need to go and recreate all the scripts every time I go through a change event. I build up this catalog of scripts that I can reuse over and over and over and over again. Right, so let's say from General Ledger, linking back to what we talked about at Dimension Focus, to say, well, I need to embark on a change project. So I've created for our session today a little change project inside of Swift Test. And then inside of Swift Test, I've replicated and said, okay, I'll create a general ledger section. So I will test all my general ledger tests inside of this section. So what I can do just by clicking on the base catalog, and I can say, well, I want to take this capturing of the journal with the subledger information. So remember the focus told us that subledger has been affected. And I want to go test the script. I literally drag and drop and say copy. And that script with all its steps, everything has been copied for me. So if I click on that script inside of my testing project that I've created now for us in April, all the steps are there. So let's run this test and then see what happens. Hit the execute button. It's got some parameters in terms of user credentials, environment, URL, and stuff like that. I think it's best, let's see it busy executing, and I can talk through what's happening. So what I've done is I've just quickly docked my screen. So JDE Edwards screen on the left-hand side, which Swiftest started up for me. And you'll see Swiftest on the right-hand side giving instructions of what needs to be done. So it will say log on to our testing environment with the certain credentials. Open up the journal entry application. And then from the journal entry application, what we do is go and read from a data store. So what you do with a data store is you can go and stage information and prepare it for you. So like GL date. I wouldn't want to hard code the current GL date in all my scripts, because as you guys know, that JDE Edwards data is a living organism that moves forward all the time. So if I store the current GL date in a data store, and I just point my script to go and pick up the value of the GL date that's currently open for my period, my scripts will then use that and consume it. If in JDE Edwards my period date moves forward, all I need to do is update one value in my data store, and all my scripts throughout my environment will now see the new date and continue working going forward. I don't need to go and change 100 scripts, one section. You can see how that dynamic information and storing it is very useful. So as you can see there on the bottom, it's just doing a normal journal entry for us. So it's putting in the account number. So all of those information, you could also put into a staging area to say, well, this is the information that I want to run through, running through different permutations if you want. So here we see now where the script is entering into the subledger section. So let's see what happens over here. So I'm entering a subledger A, so that's address book type information, and then I enter now, the script will send something to the subledger field. So if you notice, previously, before we applied the ESU to this environment, I was able to create a script and I was able to type in the word Ellen, because that's what I wanted. I'm doing this expense travel reallocation, so I want to change it to that guy. So JDE is telling me, no, you can't do that because of the new validation that's in place. So my script from Swiftest, previously it was working, and now it's failing. So classically what happens when something goes wrong during a test, it's either the script that's incorrect, that needs to be corrected, or configuration might be incorrect. So maybe someone made a configuration change, and my script is supposed to work, but the configuration was wrong, and then it will fail. Or we've introduced some customization, and the customization is actually failing due to the development. So those are the three main areas, classic areas gets affected. So in this scenario, my configuration is fine, my objects are fine, but my script is incorrect because we've applied a fix and we've enhanced our environment. So let's go and fix it. Let me show you how easy it is to go and fix a script. So all that I would go and do is, here's my script. I would go and find there, step 11 is where I typed in the guy's name into the subledger field, which is a mistake. Now, due to the new validation, I need to put in his address book number. So all I need to do is hit the pencil, and I can now take out Ellen, and I can put in the address book number. Script has been changed. And knowing finance, there's usually two legs, so I'll probably make a mistake twice. So there at step 16, I typed in the name. So I'll hit the pencil here on the right. There's Ellen. So I'll just take out Ellen, and I'll type in the address book number. Hit save. So in a matter of a couple of seconds, I've now changed and updated the script. So let's see. I go and execute script, and I'll dock it again to the right, and dock that one to the left. And now the script is rerunning. So it took you saw how quick it was for me to go and edit that script. We'll see if it actually worked. But consider this, that I could take, let's say, this journal script, and I could copy it, and I could add additional steps. So I can go and repeat and reuse and enrich and add different flavors that's simulating my business processes by using this copy functionality. And using the data store, I can add in some flexibility and I can pass data to it dynamically all the time. So that is where there's a big return on investment. Like Dave was saying, when we go through a change event and we're flying an ESU that I need to test, and let's say something is wrong, whether it was a config change issue or whether it's a script issue, you can see how little effort it actually takes to go and fix the script and just rerun. So as you see right here, we're busy re-executing the script. In practice, this is probably not what you would do. So the point of automation is that you can create a script, it's all working and it's all well, and then I would schedule it to run in an unattended mode. So we've got a scheduler engine inside of Swifties that you could say, please go and execute script A, B, C, and D for me. And I will go away to lunch, I'll come back and I will review the results of those scripts to see which ones have failed and which ones were successful. I will go note down the failures and go and action them, either fix the script or fix the configuration or fix the development change. Right, so if we look, there it's now entering the subledger value, so hopefully, if my change worked, he will type in 6001, which is the address book number. Where previously, this is where the script failed. So now, if JDE exits the row, the validation is successful. So you can see, we've now just proven that the script editing just worked. So coming back to the scheduler that I was talking about just now. So what you would do is you would potentially build out little business processes. Let's say procure to pay, order to cash. So I can take script A, B, Z, and X, and I can combine them using Swift test queues. So I can say one script, then the next script, then the next script, combine them, and by the way, please pass the information from one script to the next. As you guys know, that inside of JDE, the data is moving forward all the time. So next number is batch. I can't hard code the batch number into, let's say, another script to go and approve and post this journal, because immediately after I've posted it, that next number is changed. So I can have Swifties capture that information and handshake it. So if you look at the step that Swifties is performing right now, where we're clicking OK on the journal, what's happened is we've got the batch number now. Swifties is storing that number, so 9710, that batch number, into the dynamic data store. So if I go and create another script to go and approve and post a journal, I would say, please go and refer to the batch number that we've created in the previous script to go and approve and post. So you can see how that way you could go and create business processes, procure to pay, order to cash, production to delivery. Right, so there you can see it's all closed, done. And one thing to notice is you'll see that it's all JDE guys that wrote Swifties, so green being good, red being bad. So just now when we had the failure, it went all red, so green is good. One point to note that Dave was talking about, and let me just show you here, on this script that we've just run. So there's the execution information now. So on script 6, the journal with subledger information script that we executed, there you can see when we did the one that actually failed, and it's giving me the information of all the steps that it performed that were successful, and at the point where it actually fails out. By the way, each and every step, as Swifties is going through committing the transactions on JDE Edwards, it does screen prints, and it brings that information back so that we can see why it's failed and where it's failed and what corrective action to take. So you can see that the blue blocks on the bottom here is future tense. We've not executed these because it failed at the exit of subledger with Alan's name. If I look at my last test where we executed it again after the fix, and you can see green all the way through, and there you can see where we've entered in 6001 in the subledger and it's actually successful. And if I scroll down to the bottom, there you can see there's the batch number 9710 that's been stored and available for me to use. So quite nifty and useful stuff. Thanks. Back over to you, Dave.
Okay, thanks very much, Pierre. Now, it's not our intention in today's session to give you a comprehensive demonstration of Dimension's Swift test because it is a very powerful testing tool and it's constantly evolving. These two solutions are actually available in the cloud, so it's very easy for us to just keep adding new functionality to make life even easier for you. Every time I see the product, I see new functionality, and I'm always very impressed with just how powerful these testing solutions are. Now, the key benefits from the Swift test product that Pierre has just shown you is that there's just no need for specialist staff. So you don't have to have expensive resources or scarce resources acting as a bottleneck. Your users themselves can set up their own test scenarios. It's been designed specifically for JDE EnterpriseOne. So you saw from the demonstration from Pierre that it actually opens up EnterpriseOne and it sits side by side on the screen. And it is very, very easy to set up and, as you saw, to edit those tests. So there is absolutely very little scope for making any errors, and that will save you an awful lot of time when you're doing your testing. So now let's move on to just showing how, by putting these tools together, we can really slash your testing effort quite comfortably by up to 85%. Now, it's very clear how dimension focus saves you time and effort because it's identifying, in many cases, that you only need to test a very small part of your system, and it shows you clearly what you need to test and what you don't need to test. But it may not be quite so obvious as to how much time the Dimension Swift test is going to save you. So let's just have a quick look at what your current situation may be like and how it could change by using these solutions. So let's look first of all at a manual approach that many organizations still adopt for EnterpriseOne testing. Now you apply one or more ESUs to your E1 system, or you may make modifications to the standard code. Now in order to test this, you need to manually run through the whole process, recording what you do and documenting the correct results. When you find any bugs, these need to be fixed by your developers. Once the bugs have been fixed, you need to rerun the test manually again, which takes the same amount of time as it did before, maybe even a little longer, as you may need to check and compare the results that you're seeing. And you may have to repeat this process several times until the software is clean. Some weeks or months later, you may make some more mods or apply another ESU. Again, you need to manually create or recreate your scripts, document them and the expected results, and report any bugs to be fixed. A month's fix, you again have to go through the cycle of manually rerunning those tests to check the results. And so it goes on, time and time and time again. Let us see how it works using Dimension Swift test. The Swift test, as you've seen, is integrated with EnterpriseOne, and you have your Swift test and E1 applications open side by side on your screen. Swift test guides you through your options throughout any business process that you want to look at, and it enables you to quickly and error-free create your test scenarios. Now, at this stage, there are not significant time savings to be realized, but as Swift test keeps track of what the user does and it stores the results, you don't actually need to spend time documenting your tests. Once any bugs have been fixed, you just resubmit the appropriate tests or tests to the test queue to run automatically. And even if you do need to make any changes to your test scenario or script, editing the test, as you've seen, is a very quick and very easy process. So every time you have to go through this retesting process, you are saving close to 100% of the equivalent manual process. So your savings really do start to mount up the more testing that you do. And so it goes on. Every time you're making mods or applying ESUs, saving you time every step of the way, again and again and again. So how much could you save? Now, if you are conducting your testing manually, you'll need X amount of time. Now, clearly the number of man days that you require for your organization will vary depending on the size of your project, the implementation that you have, etc. But if you're using the DWS Dimension Focus product, you'll be able to identify just what needs to be tested. And conservatively, we're saying that this could easily be just 25% of your custom code. And from a lot of the ESUs that we've looked at, it would actually be far lower than that. But we want to be very conservative in our estimates here. So we're saying that typically, dimensional focus over the lifetime of your system, it will save you about 75% of the effort. So you only have to do 25% of the testing effort. Now, if you're then using the Swift test product to generate your test scenarios and run your tests, again, very conservatively, we think you're going to save about 40% from a manual test approach. So you only need 60% of the effort that you would have done if you were testing things manually. But again, I want to stress we've been very, very conservative with our numbers. But of course, if you're using these two products in combination, and Dimension Focus has identified that you only need to spend 25% of your testing time on the code, and Dimension Swift Test is showing that you only need to spend 60% of your overall effort. That effort is 60% of 25%. So you only actually need to spend 15% of your effort on testing your system. And that's where we come up with the very conservative savings of 85% in man days and costs. The statistics are one thing. What does it actually mean financially? So we have a number of scenarios here that we've analyzed for a number of customers. Now, this first customer, they are a very small implementation. They have just 200 JDE EnterpriseOne users. And their 3-year usage profile is to perform a major upgrade in year 1, and then smaller custom code events or custom development events in years 2 and 3. And over a 3-year period, they spend approximately 396 days testing. Now, using the estimates that we've just spoken about of identifying that only 25% of their system needs testing, and that the Swift test product will also reduce the testing effort as well, then we estimate that they will make a return on their investment in the region of $61,000, and that's after paying their licensing costs. The next customer scenario, a somewhat larger customer, had 1,100 users, and they had 20 testers. And over a 3-year period, they spend close to 3,000 man days testing. And the estimates of the savings that this customer will make will be close to $1 million over the 3-year period. Third customer scenario had 2,500 users and again 20 testers. Now, they had a slightly more complex environment in the major upgrade that they were embarking on was actually going to spill well over into a second year, thereby increasing their testing burden. We estimated that they're going to spend something like 7,100 days testing over a 3-year period. And this customer is going to save in the region of $1.8 million over a 3-year period. So as you can see from these examples, the more days you spend testing in your environment, the greater the returns you're likely to achieve from using the DWS Dimension Focus and Swift Test products. Even if you have only a small number of JDE users and a small number of testers, you should still get a very healthy return on your investment, in addition to having a much more thorough and more accurate testing process. Because you pay for your licenses on a subscription basis, you really do save as you pay. So to summarize what we've covered today and in this short series of best practice webinars, in the first webinar, we showed how the DWS Dimension Analyze service is used in the planning phase for your upgrade to produce extremely accurate forecasts of the upgrade effort required. and it can reduce your modified footprint by up to 75%, thereby reducing your upgrade effort and costs. In the second webinar, we address the execution of your upgrade and explain how you can deliver your upgrades on time, within budget, and with minimal defects by using the DWS Dimension Professional Service. And in this final webinar in this series, we've identified the challenges of planning the testing of your upgrade, shown you how you can minimize your testing effort by focusing on just what needs testing, and we've also shown you how you can automate your testing without the need for expensive technical specialists. Now, as 9.2 is now available, there is no better time for you to actually get current and stay current. And with that in mind, the next event that we're planning on May the 25th, this is not yet detailed up on our website, but we've only firmed up on this date this afternoon. We're going to be looking at some of the key information that was presented at last week's Quest Collaborate event in Las Vegas. And we will be giving you a synopsis of the key messages from Oracle about things you need to be thinking about when planning to upgrade to 9.2, and then things you need to be thinking about regarding adopting a policy of staying on the latest release. So we're at the planning stage of that webinar at the moment, so the details are not yet up on our website, but if you check back there in a week or two's time on the events page on our website, you can see the address on the screen now. You should see the details appearing. But it's worth just putting a note in your diary for the same time as today for May the 25th, just to keep that clear if that is of interest to you. So I promised we'd have a few minutes at the end for any questions that you would like to raise. So if you haven't raised any questions yet, then now is your opportunity to do so. And just a reminder, the questions panel is on the dashboard on the right-hand side of your screen down towards the bottom. So do raise questions. I mentioned Pierre has got a huge amount of experience with all things JDE Edwards, so do make use of his experience. And I'll just check on what's coming through. First question coming through is probably one that I can take, Pierre. Are there any free trials available for Dimension Focus? The answer is absolutely yes. We are very keen for people to see and experience for themselves just how easy these products are to use. So if you're interested in a no obligation, a free trial of this software that you've seen today, then just let me know or give some feedback in the feedback questionnaire that you'll be directed to after today's event, and we can arrange that for you. Question I think we have covered, but I'll raise it again for Pierre to go into a bit more detail. Will Dimension Focus analyze the effect on our customer applications?
Hi, Dave. Yeah, that's a question that comes up quite often, because in JDE, as you know, that we are allowed to touch, change, and modify. So yes, Dimension Focus analyzes that. So when we do the extract from the source code, we extract everything, including your custom objects. So when an ESU gets applied, you might have used a standard business function or data structure, or you might be updating into a standard table. So all of that information is included in our analysis. So in the heat map, you will see the custom objects actually being listed there. So there's a P55 or 56 or 57. That object, if it's been affected by the change, will actually list there and give you the same details that I showed you on that journal application. So yeah, definitely.
Great. Another question that regularly comes up: which releases of EnterpriseOne do we support?
Yep. So it's from the 9s. So it's from Application Suite 9.0 onwards, including 9.2. So we've validated and tested that one. From the tools release for Swift test, an important note is tools release 9.1.2 is from that release and up. We are supported and we will help you.
Okay. And this is a question that actually comes up much more frequently than I would expect. So does it support record and playback?
Yep, no. So we've made the decision when we went and developed Swiftest not to do the record and playback for probably for a good reason that we've now realized afterwards is when you make a change. So like the test that you just saw, if I use the record and playback functionality, I would have to record the whole script all over again just to change 2 things. So it's much more beneficial to be so closely coupled to JDE and just update exactly there where the change is needed. So no for playback. We don't record and playback. We don't see the need for that at this point.
Yeah, if I can just add to that from my own experience, I've been involved in testing on and off for a good many years throughout my IT career. Record and playback was really the first generation of testing solutions that were introduced back in the 1970s. And whilst a lot of people still use it, it is very, very difficult to get any form of return on investment that you make in that area because it is so time consuming and just so manually labor intensive. So no, and as Pierre said, we took a conscious decision not to go down that route. So that just about brings us to the end of our time that we have allotted for today. I hope you've found that session useful. If you'd like to follow DWS, I'll put all of our social media and website details up on the screen. My email address is up on the screen as well. If you think of any questions that you would like to raise after you've left today. Now, when you leave today, you should be directed to a very short feedback questionnaire that will only take you 1 minute to complete. So we do ask everybody please to complete that because it does help us to make sure that we are delivering the sort of services and webinars that you're interested in and that you get the sort of follow-up that you are interested in receiving from DWS. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone very much for attending, especially those of you who have actually joined us for all 3 webinars in this particular series. And I look forward to talking to you again in our next series of webinars starting in the middle of May. So thanks very much and goodbye.